Welcome, friends, to the Someone Gets Me podcast. I am your host, Dianne A, and I am so delighted that you're here. This podcast was created because I believe there is a visionary leader inside each one of us who is waiting to be seen. In each episode of Someone Gets Me, you will hear useful tips from successful visionaries who will share their stories about how being seen has allowed them to take their vision out into the world with action.
Greetings, friends. It's Dianne here at Someone Gets Me, and I am so delighted that you're listening to this episode with me today. I have an amazing guest for you, this really kind, generous, amazing woman who lives in the Northeast United States. She lives, I think, in Western Massachusetts, and her office is in Vermont, or it's the other way around. She'll have to tell you. Her name is Dr. Shwartz, and she is a specialist in autoimmune disease from more than one viewpoint. You know, a lot of people are very straight and they do everything from one viewpoint. But us multi-potentialite vision people, we have to look at things from more than one facet. So I have an expert on the show today that can really help us understand some things from different viewpoints about how our bodies work, how to help them heal, and how we can be optimum in everything we do. So welcome to the show, Rebecca.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Well, I want to just start right off with, tell us a little bit about you. Did I get it right of where you live and where your office is, or did I get it backwards?
Well, I live in Western Mass, and I have offices in Western Mass and in Brattleboro, Vermont. So I have two offices. Yeah.
I was close. Okay. So tell us a little bit about you. I think it's amazing.
Well, you know, I was born in Eastern Mass, and I always wanted to be a doctor when I was little. But then I hated doctors. So I crossed that out of the career path, was more interested in ecology, and, you know, organizing, environmental things like that. And then when I found out being a naturopathic doctor was a profession, I pretty much just jumped into that. And it was sort of, I loved plants and I loved working with nature and I loved working with people. And so I was really drawn to that. And then I had acupuncture, and it was amazing for me. It was sort of, so I knew I had to study that. And I did all that. And then I came out of school, and I met my mentor, Elijah, and I started working with her and learned that, healing can be on this whole other level. You know, in school, we sort of gave lip service to healing the body, the mind, and the spirit, but the mind and the spirit were just sort of there wasn't any concrete tools. And when I met her and I learned about 5-element acupuncture and Sufi spiritual healing, I was like, this is why I suffered through those 5 years of, you know, all that training. This is how you really heal people. And I then actually went on to go to the University of Spiritual Healing and Sufism, because I really couldn't get enough. So, you know, now in mind, I was working, you know, the whole time I was doing that spiritual healing training. But now I really incorporate all of it. You know, I love working with people who want the whole thing. You know, you want the nitty gritty, what are the imbalances that are going on in my body and how do I fix them? With diet, with herbs, you know, with acupuncture, with medication if needed. But then also the people I love working with are the ones that also really want to know, well, what are the spiritual teachings that this disease, that what's going on in my life have for me? And, you know, I find that when people go there too, it's really the route to real true healing. I don't think you can do one without the other.
Oh my God. That's all I have to say, because I do everything from the spiritual viewpoint and the emotional and physical. And I teach people that it's mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual. It's not just mind, body, spirit. Mm-hmm. And when you were talking about the schools kind of giving lip service to that thing and focusing on the body, that is so what happens. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, I try to teach people that, hold on a second here, you know, yes, the body's important. And yes, it's a reflection of all the other things that are in balance, but why don't we look a little deeper? Mm-hmm. And oh my gosh, that's amazing. So share with everybody, you said 5-element acupuncture, and I know I've had other acupuncturists on the show, and I've had 5-element acupuncture, and I've had several different kinds because I love it. Would you explain like what 5-element acupuncture brings to the table that's maybe different from one of the other forms or something like that so people can understand?
Uh-huh. Yeah, sure. The way I think about it is that if what 5-element acupuncture does is it really looks not at your brokenness, but at like sort of what your superhero power is and how to really bolster that. So for example, say somebody keeps like falling out of trees, right? As a metaphor, keep falling out of trees and getting hurt. So the goal is not to like cut down the trees or not to tell them to not climb the trees, but the goal is to like make them the best tree climber possible. And somebody might be there might be 1 million people that are coming in to see you in this metaphor of like broken ankles. And some of them, it's because they keep falling out of trees. So you make them a good tree climber. I don't think I'm explaining this very well, but
so you're trying to say, so it's like, instead of saying, this is what's wrong with you, let's fix it or put a Band-Aid on it. It's like, let's look at everything that's right about you that it either could be off or you're not really letting shine through, and let what's right about you become bigger so then it takes care of the imbalance. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, right. That's a good way to put it. And, a lot of times people are in distress and they're in pain because they're sort of those things that are ultimately really good about them can also have a dark side. And they're really in tune and in touch with how hurtful and painful and sort of dark it is. And it's like, oh, well, we're not trying to surgically cut that out. We're actually looking at that and transforming it into something that is actually what makes you really shine.
That's beautiful. And the first thing I thought of when you were talking about the dark side of an asset is being an empath, where you can and feel all the energy and how sometimes that can be really dark. But I also work with people with overexcitabilities who are gifted and are really intelligent and can hyper focus and really, really learn things. They're very intense emotionally, all different things, and how it comes with great power and amazement, but it also can be a real struggle at the same time. Like there's that other side of the coin. So is there an example of somebody maybe that you've helped that came in all kind of discombobulated and that you can think about and kind of walk us through a little bit about how you think and how does it work to start helping somebody bring that superpower out using acupuncture? I guess you must be waking up the meridian so that they can feel it better, but how does that work?
Right. I think I'm going to tell you about myself.
Okay.
That's the easiest one, and there's no confidentiality issues that so I used to struggle with really a lot of anxiety and fears, so much dark fears that I don't think I ever got like an official diagnosis because I didn't want to even tell anybody. And when I started studying 5-element acupuncture and I learned about what we call the transformation of virtue, which is with a particular element, there's sort of, again, that dark side. And then what I call the superpower side. And so in my case, it was the water element. And people who are water people have a lot of fear because we're very in touch with all the possible things that can go bad. But the flip side of that is wisdom. And the flip side of that is being able to be the type of person that can really sit in the dark, fully aware of all the things that you don't know, and move forward anyway. It's sort of like navigating by the light of the stars. And when I started so part of it is learning that. And then in terms of working with it with the meridians, it's, if you're a water person, you have water issues, it's working on the kidney and the bladder meridians. And so putting acupuncture needles in certain points. But, part of why I'm really passionate about doing everything all together is that in my own healing journey, it was really important to really do that acupuncture, to do the spiritual work around it as well, and then also fix the body stuff.
What a great story. I'm a water person, and a lot of the people who listen to this show are water people as well. And when you were talking about the flip side of that really intense fear and that gripping fear, I know that feeling, being wisdom, I was like, whoa,
Yeah.
That I never heard that before. So talk a little bit about how you blend being a naturopath with the acupuncture that you kind of explained so people can understand, and also the spiritual healing. How do you blend those? You use them in your own life, so you can use your own example if you want to, but how do they go together? It just sounds very fascinating.
So let's say, for example, somebody comes in, and we can use you mentioned the thyroid. So we can use the example of Hashimotos, which is an autoimmune thyroid process. A lot of people, a lot of women especially, have that going on. Basically, you probably know, or your listeners probably know too, but it's an autoimmune process where your body is attacking the thyroid. And so say somebody comes in, and it's not, sometimes it's treated well in conventional medicine, but for a lot of people, the treatments aren't very good. And a lot of times, mostly women, and women are sort of classically not listened to very well in the medical world, which is a whole other issue.
Right. That's another soapbox we can get on again.
Another soapbox for later. So say somebody comes in feeling that. They're feeling tired, and they're feeling foggy headed, and they're feeling like something's not right. And so probably where we'll start out with is running some lab tests and see what's going on. So say somebody's coming in with Hashimotos, and we do a diagnosis for that. If their thyroid levels are low enough, we'll give them a medication, because that is really something that you really need, especially in the beginning. But we won't stop there. We'll also look at some of the underlying inflammation that's going on, talk about diet, talk about herbs, maybe do some what's called functional medicine testing. So testing other hormones, testing for gut imbalances. So just figuring out what's going on in your body that's causing this autoimmunity. Is it something else that we can fix? But then going beyond that, there's also, for a lot of people that have autoimmune body processes, have autoimmune mental processes going on. If you've got a body that's beating up on itself, you probably have a mind that's doing the same thing. And you may have a mind that's saying things to you that you wouldn't even say to like somebody you sort of liked. And so, in my experience, it's important to work on that. In addition to, some people, you can come in and we could just do the medication and the herbs and that kind of stuff and get your body feeling good. But to really truly heal, I think it's important to work on, for in this example, those inner voices. That's where the spiritual healing comes in. And that, the acupuncture, I sort of wrapped into all of that because it works on so many levels. It works, the meridians go deep within the body, and we can move the energy, the energy that's in the physical body with it. But then they also can work on, all the acupuncture points have really deep teachings in them. And so they can be catalysts for the spiritual healing as well. Does that make sense?
You are making perfect sense to me. And I'm listening to you, and I'm like thinking of this friend of mine who has this very lifetime of skin problems, and she said that they keep telling her it's autoimmune, and it looks like psoriasis, but it's not. And some days it's really bad and painful, and some days it isn't. And I know a lot about natural healing because I've done a lot of study in it, and I practice it, a lot of it myself, but I'm not in the same league that you're in. So like, I know enough to know I don't know enough, but I know something, right?
Yeah.
And so when she said that this morning, I said, oh, I'm going to be interviewing this really neat lady. It's a doctor who knows about autoimmune. I'm going to ask her. And so when you were talking about the mind part, I'm thinking, okay, well, I teach a lot of metaphysics where your mind's in charge of your body and it's how it works, which is what you're saying. If you don't treat the mind, you can keep band-aiding the body all day long, but it can never really fully heal until we get all the system in alignment, right? That means that what I wrote it down, that if her body keeps beating her up, she's still beating herself up mentally on some level.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I've never had that conversation with her, but that's a big aha, that our mind really is a bigger player in our physical health than I think a lot of Western people really understand, or maybe they're just now understanding it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I also want to mention, because I think this is really important, is that just because you have this, it doesn't mean it's your fault. It's a thing that's happening to you, and it's a thing that you have to work with, and it's a thing you've been given in this lifetime to work with. But I think that sometimes when we talk about all this stuff, it's like, oh, well, if I could just, it's my fault. It's my brain doing this thing. It's all in my head. It's not, it's a process. And all of these things I've mentioned are not something that is meant to be thrown at you all at once. It's step by step by step. And sometimes, in the thyroid example, you might not be ready to kind of address your underlying mental patterns and what in your history might have caused it before you get some thyroid medication, the appropriate thyroid medication on board, because there's kind of like, you need to make your body be feeling good too. So I just mentioned that just because I think sometimes people can feel a little bit overwhelmed by feeling it's like it's their whole job and it's all their fault to heal that. Does that make sense?
You're making sense, Rebecca, because I remember when I first started learning the power of my thoughts years, like 30 years ago or whenever it was, 40 probably now. And I remember learning, and I remember, I don't know, but it was a significant amount of time, I think, probably a year or so, that I was secretly beating myself up because I was doing all this stuff wrong, but I didn't even know what it was, and I thought it was my fault, and everything it was awful. I walked around thinking worse than I was already thinking that. I was already dealing with that from my childhood. And then I was like, are you telling me I'm the one who created all this? It's my fault. I did all of this to myself. And and so I'm glad you brought that up, because it's not our fault.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not. And then sometimes people who are on the spiritual path and are sort of inclined to this type of thing, they're like, oh, well, I know what I should do. Why can't I just do it? And that's something to unpack too, because that can be like the autoimmune that goes on top of it. It's tricky. That's like the autoimmune mindset being like, oh, you're trying to catch me? Well, let me just beat you up on this other way.
Oh, that's interesting. So the autoimmune mind thing is like a trickster, like a fox, and it will keep trying to beat you up from any way you catch it over here, and it's going to show up over there.
Yeah, it's like having 100 evil lawyers in your head. And they're always going to outsmart whatever arguments you have. So you have to go below it to a whole other level.
And therein lies the power of the spiritual practice. Because you can keep trying to silence all those 100 evil lawyers. You're never going to be able to do it. But if you go below it.
Right. And the smarter you are, the harder it is, because you can come up with all these responses to them. And then they'll come up with responses right back. So it's why it's like, I work with a lot of really smart women. And it's kind of, our brains are so important, and they're such an ally, but we have to have them be kind of, in Chinese medicine, we say they're in service to the heart, not the physical heart, but in Chinese medicine, we say the heart is where Shen, or spirit, comes through, where the light shines through. And so part of healing it is just really bowing your mind in service to that really greater part of yourself.
Wow. That sheds a lot of light on things for a lot of people that I know that listen to the show. And for me too, like in my own life, sometimes I go through that where my brain's going around and I'm like, okay, I need to dial down deeper, but I'm exhausted. I don't really feel like it, but I need to dial down deeper, but my brain wants to work. And that's part of the intellectual overexcitability I have as a gifted person. And that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. My next question is, well, kind of like going along these lines is, if you get somebody who's working with you and they're really comfortable with the spiritual part, but yet they're a little bit resistant to the getting physical help, kind of like, well, I'll just do it all spiritually and then my body will naturally take care of itself. I don't have to worry about herbs or making any changes or acupuncture or any of that. I'll just do it spiritually. What kinds of things would you say to that person to help them see that maybe it's a yes and rather than an either or?
Right. It's entirely possible that you'll be able to heal your body just by doing spiritual practices. But I haven't seen it happen very often. And I really think that when people are resistant to that, I think a lot of times people have been really negatively affected by the conventional medical establishment. And I think there's actually some trauma in there, some that people really are aware of, and some that's just this really subtle kind of being dismissed, not being cared for. And I think it's, you mentioned intuition. And I've had people ask me if I'm an intuitive healer before, and I do have a lot of intuition, but what I really love is fostering people's own intuition. And so in this case that you mentioned, I would do some exercises to help them really get in touch with how to find their own inner guidance on what to need. So there actually isn't a separation between the spirit and the physical, where they can say, okay, I really feel some pretty strong guidance that I should be taking this herb and not that herb. And then I'd have them really check in with me or another healer, because, your guidance is good, but I think, at least for me, I like to make sure it also kind of is going along with things that make sense from more of a, intellectual level. If you kind of, I'll sort of maybe present a few options and say, okay, let's work on your guidance, see what you think you need. If you really don't think you need the medication and that's your strong guidance, then unless I think you're going to die without it. I mean, even if I did, it's not my decision to make, because people have their own agency. But again, yeah, I sort of rambling, but I think it's about fostering intuition.
Yeah, the person themselves, trusting their own intuition and their own inner knowing of what's right for them the most. Mm-hmm. And I like the point that you bring up about checking in with somebody who's in the know, I call it, because I even think I double check with people on my stuff, even though I'm pretty good at it, because I think that we don't heal in isolation in whatever part, and the interaction and the connection with another person that's of like mind, mm-hmm. I think gives not only credibility and confirmation, but also that other human support, like somebody else gets me, somebody actually is on this road with me. I'm not by myself and trying to make it. I think that that's also really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's really the case. That's cool. So what kind of food do you like to eat? How do you eat? Because, you had to deal with anxiety and you've done a lot of work to heal yourself. And so, and you mentioned gut and nutrition. Mm-hmm. And so what are the favorite things that Rebecca likes?
What are the favorite things I like? Well, I love, there's the favorite things that I think are delicious, and there's the favorite things that I think are really healthy and healing. And it's like a Venn diagram.
Right.
One thing I love is bone broth. Mm-hmm. It's easy to make, and it sort of gets this sort of play now as a superfood, which is not actually wrong. It's got a tremendous amount of gut healing potential. It can help with your bones. I had a gerontology professor when I was in school who did a study to see how they could get enough, a significant amount of calcium into the broth, because they just kept doing x-rays of these elderly people and they kept seeing these little lumps, and it was their calcium supplements that, they might as well have just thrown down the toilet for all the good they were doing. And so they found cooking it for 24 hours in something acidic, having a little bit of something acidic in the broth. So I like doing that a lot.
So how do you make bone broth to make it a little acidic?
You add a little lemon juice or vinegar
to the big pot of water and the bones.
Yep.
That's it. Oh, okay.
That's it. It's really easy. So that's one of my favorites. I've had to sort of change some of my favorite foods lately, because I've realized that I have, I love chocolate and green tea, and it's been really sad for me to realize I'm reacting to them because of some histamine imbalances that I have. And I'm not going to get into all of it, but I think I'm mentioning it because there's sort of that thing that I work with my patients and with myself about finding foods that you really love and you enjoy and nourish you and aren't hurting you. And sometimes I really like to focus on that enjoyment, because I would say those were two of my things I probably would have told you, and they have a ton of health benefits if you get good kinds. And I can't eat them right now. So what am I doing? And I'm looking at what's in season here in the Northeast, and getting fresh plums and fresh peaches and fresh apples, and really enjoying the seasonal fruits Eating seasonally is wonderful. It's much easier in Florida, of course.
Wow. I was just talking to somebody about eating seasonally the other day, about how I forget what, something about, we were talking about it, and I go, think about it. If something's grown in a hothouse in Mexico or some far off place, or even down the street, and it's not natural to the season your body's in, I don't know how that it assimilates as well as if you're eating the food that's naturally in season wherever you are.
Well, I think there's part of that is true, but I also think that if I were to only eat food in season in New England, I would have, people just used to eat a lot of canned and sort of preserved vegetables and fruits, and I'm happy that I can get fresh fruits and vegetables in the winter. So I think eating as locally as you can is great. They do grow greens in greenhouses around here, but they're a little cost prohibitive for a lot of people. So I think there's a balance.
Mm-hmm.
There's a balance.
And that's where, somebody working with you spiritually, but also in following their own intuition, like learning how to trust that kind of balance. Like how am I meant to negotiate whatever this situation is?
Right. Food is a big one for that. And so many people have eating disorders. And I think when you talk about diet, it's really easy to trigger them. And I've, definitely have you heard of orthorexia before?
No, what is that?
It's like basically you get obsessed with the list of what you can and can't eat. So it's basically somebody who said, oh, I'm only supposed to eat seasonally. And then they basically have an eating disorder around it because they're like afraid to eat anything that's not. I haven't actually seen that with seasonal, but you sort of get what I'm saying.
Yes.
And I've seen a lot of people with that. And so I really feel like you were mentioning the intuitive stuff with food is so important. Focusing on what's nourishing you, focusing on what your body thinks that it needs, what your intuition tells you. And that is like a huge part of healing, because if you have that, then you're going to do a better job of really healing for your whole life, because it can also help direct you to what practitioners are going to help you and what modalities.
That's true. That's really true. You just reminded me of this really I thought it was weird at the time, but I've since learned it probably wasn't. I was speaking at a gifted conference in Utah many, many years ago. And I did my talk and everything was great. It was on meditation, and it was first thing in the morning, like 7:30 or something ridiculous. And so I was done for the day, and I could go and, go to any talk I wanted or do whatever. And then I had to speak the next day. So I'd like kind of the day to decide what I wanted to do. And I decided I was going to explore the town we were in. We were in Salt Lake, but there was a town near it, or maybe it was part of Salt Lake. I don't remember now. It was a long time ago. But all of a sudden, I was driving around and I saw this health food store. And of course, I wanted to go check it out. And I got into that store and all I wanted was milk. And I don't usually drink a lot of milk. I'm like, okay, I have to have it. And I have to have it like now. It felt like an energetic emergency. So I even drank it in the store and just paid for the empty container. But within like 5 or 6 sips of it, I was all better. Everything was fine. I felt really good. And I'm thinking, okay, there was something in there that my body wanted so badly that that's the only way I could translate what I needed was milk. I don't know whether it was a calcium. I don't know I don't have any idea. I've never had it happen after that either. Only that one time in my whole life. And I'm like, okay, go with it. And my friend who was with me was like, you've really lost your mind. I said, no, I haven't. This is really important. And now I feel better. And if I would have fought it all day long, or rationalized it away, I don't know how long, when I would have figured it out what to do. Right. Oh, I forgot about that story. That's really hilarious. So what kinds of things do you do for stress reduction and taking care of yourself? Because helping somebody heal themselves and working on the intimate level that you work with people on, it takes a lot out of you. It's a very big investment on your part, which I commend you for. It's really nice to meet an authentic healer. And so what do you do, tell people to do for stress, or what do you do?
Well, I have a lot more compassion for this these days because I have 2 very small children. I have a 4-year-old and a 15-month-old. And back before I had children, I'd say, oh, we'll do this and this and this. And, now that I'm a working mom, I think, man, where is the time? So I think it's, There's sort of the standard ones, of course, like exercise, sleep, and meditation. But I think that, let's see, there's different answers to this, what I tell people and what I do for myself. For me, I know that the exercise and having my own spiritual practice is so important. It's so key. And what I've learned since I've had the kids is that doesn't have to be hours and hours of the day, and that it's all about consistency. And that's been a really deep teaching for me. And I try to share it with people when it seems like, well, I don't have time to do any of this. Some days I do 5 minutes of spiritual practice before bed, and that's it. But I do it every night, so I think those are important. And also things that are fun. Not everybody even really knows what they do for fun when you're really stressed out. So I really encourage people to find something that they think is just fun and just do it. And that is something that my children have helped me with, because they are very in touch with that. So I try to channel them a little bit, and I try to have people like, imagine you were a 4-year-old just for a little bit, like find something to just do, not to try to be good at, but just to do for fun.
Oh, that's great. So that means my slinky I have that I play with is good.
Yeah. It brings you joy.
I love my slinky.
You and my daughter, she loves a slinky too.
I have a metal one, and then a client gave me one that's plastic, that's red on the outside and gold on the inside. So when it moves, it makes all these pretty colors. I love slinkies. I love it. I think it's amazing. Okay, and I have another question that I want to ask you. This is like so fun. I love asking all these neat questions. Let me see how I can put this. So when there's people who come to you, maybe because somebody else is trying to get them to try something new because Western medicine isn't working, or they're avoiding everybody. Like, I've had a bad experience and I'm never going to talk to anybody again. And somebody else is saying, no, go talk to her. Go talk to Rebecca, Dr. Shwartz. She's cool. She's not going to judge you. It's going to be okay. And they're like skeptical. What are some things you do? Like if somebody's listening and they're a little skeptical, what would you want to say or help put somebody at ease to let them know that really there's nothing to be afraid of and it's going to be okay? How do you handle that?
So if somebody's sick and nobody's been able to really help them and they've just dismissed them and they don't really want to go spend their time and money to go see somebody else who's probably going to not be able to help them and probably be rude and judgmental to them and try to give them Prozac, which describes like a fair amount of people that have come my way. I tell them that I'll really listen to them. We take my first visits an hour and a half. And so I really take the time to listen to what's going on. And I don't, sometimes doctors will treat just sort of their area of expertise. Somebody comes in with a thyroid issue, just only treat the thyroid. But I really look at people as a whole ecosystem, which we are. And so I think it's really the non-judgmental listening. And I'll also meet people where they're at too. I really like to ask people what their goals are for healing. And that's something I've sort of learned along the way. Like what I think would be my goal if I were in their situation is not necessarily what their goal is. So like, what's your goal? Is your goal that you want to be in, feel well enough that you can enjoy a vacation with your husband, for the weekend, that you want to take your grandkids on a little adventure and not have pain, that you want to be able to work and really do your passion? What is it? What is it that is impacting your life, and how do you want to be living your life? I think that's a really important conversation to have with people. And also, I'll be honest if I don't know. I think that's another thing that I, if I don't know how to help somebody, I'll tell them, and I'll find somebody who I think can.
Oh, that's so helpful. That gives me goosebumps. It's like that level of authenticity and your ability to really listen and hear what they're saying, and your integrity to say, if you don't know, you don't know, and maybe try over here or give solutions. That's commendable. And I think that people are searching for that. I think because a lot of people aren't really heard. And I think that's a human need. I think we all really need to be heard.
Yeah,
and,
I've had, I can't tell you how many people I've had who've come in and they've told me, like, I can't, like, literally, I can't remember how many people, and they just say, I don't know if you're going to help me, but I feel you're the first person who's really listened to me. And it's really healing just to be listened to and heard, to be taken seriously.
Mm-hmm. Heard. Yeah. I think that is really important. People say that to me a lot, like somebody finally took a minute to hear what I was really saying. And sometimes in that is most of the solution, is just having that human connection. It's somebody that like gets it, like you're getting it. So tell us a little bit about your work. We know that you're in the Northeast, and I'm curious if somebody's listening to us and they would like to connect with you. I'm going to put your website in the show notes. So the link to your website will be in the show notes, along with your formal biography with all of your great credentials in it. And do you work with people online? Like, what if somebody in Florida or somebody in Europe was thinking, wow, I really want to listen to her because she really is really resonating with me. I want to work with her. Will you work with somebody like that?
Yeah, I do. It's really exciting. I've just started offering telemedicine services. So I have like a secure video chat that I use, so I can work with people anywhere in the world, which is really exciting. We can do, we can do all the naturopathic stuff, and we can also do spiritual healing sessions through the video chat or through phone, and they work really well that way too. So yes, that is something I do.
Oh, amazing. That's great. So if you're listening to Rebecca and you're thinking, wow, I really want to get to know her, then look her up and make an appointment, and you'll be really blessed, because I know that I'm video chatting with her as you all are listening to us, and I'm like, wow, I want to know her more, because she has this great presence, as you can hear it in her voice. So look her up. Now, one last question. This is my favorite of all. If you could create the sign for a billboard that everyone would see, what would it say?
That everyone would see?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You're enough.
Oh, you're enough. Perfect. So you heard it, everybody, from Dr. Rebecca Shwartz. You're enough. So is there anything I didn't cover, or anything that your heart is really urging you to speak to everyone before we close the show?
You covered a lot. I think the power of silence, the power of giving yourself a little bit of space and silence to really connect with your own, inner divinity and your own inner guidance is so important. And I love working with people to cultivate it. And you probably can already do it too. So
that's beautiful.
That's what my heart felt called to mention.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you for mentioning that. That's very important. So I want to thank you so much for being on the show and taking time out of your busy schedule and offering us some really valuable information. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. This was really fun.
Very good. Well, everybody, you've been listening to Dr. Rebecca Shwartz from the northeastern area of the United States talk about amazing ways to help you with autoimmune disease and other things, spiritual healing. So look her up at drrebeccaschwartz.com. I'll put that link in the show notes. And remember, until the next show, to keep your face to the sun so the shadows fall behind you, because you're a rock star and you're here with a mighty purpose. So go out there and let your light shine. And until the next episode of Someone Gets Me, be well.
Thank you for listening. I trust you gained some valuable inspiration and information. Please join me and other visionaries in the Someone Gets Me Facebook group. Or for more information on my services and additional episodes, visit someonegetsme.com. Again, thanks for listening.